29th chapter, and it deals with the Timtum Halev, the blockage of the heart which can exist by the Beinani, and as well difficult for him it's difficult for him to sanctify himself in this which is permissible, which is based on a pasuk in the Torah. One has to sanctify himself even in this which halachically, categorically is permissible. So so he brought the Alter Rebbe brings again, because based on these two problems, we're just saying it very brief. Naturally, we elaborated on this in the past class. This was the point. This was how the 29th chapter commences, begins. For that matter, I want to tell everybody that we did actually update the TanyaOnline.com website. It's all based on the kosher tube, but the advantage it has it is the video, the kosher tube video, but it has the text as well, so one could follow with the text, and it has neatly all the previous classes, etc. It has been updated, even to including this past class, chapter 29, where everybody's invited and can go ahead and join. And we go and where we left off was how by the Beinani, this was towards the end. Again, everybody's welcome to see it. It is kosher tube or on TanyaOnline.com. To see how the Alter Rebbe gives us his suggestion. He brings this which is said in the Yeshiva in Gan Eden. If you remember, we spoke about the Yeshiva in Gan Eden, which gives a suggestion, and it says that just like a log, that in order that the fire should penetrate into a log, even though the material is the perfect material, susceptible to fire, or which carries the fire so well, it's dry wood, but nonetheless it's just not going to burn if you leave it as a log. You got to break it up to pieces. You break it up, then it carries the fire. The fire is able to penetrate, and it can carry the fire nicely and for a longer time, for the light you need, for the warmth, etc. Similarly, there's the body, which doesn't allow the Arieh HaNeshama, the light of the Neshama, to penetrate. So there's a fire burning, and the body is kind of it's similar to that log, which it stands with its timtum, or it stands with its determination. It's kind of stubborn, which doesn't allow the Arieh HaNeshama, the light of the Neshama, to enter, to penetrate. So you got to break it up. You got to break it up as well. You got to break it apart. And Alter Rebbe explained how do you break apart the body. He says the body is the host for the animal soul. The animal soul is the host for the impure spirits and the spirits of impurity. So when one has a broken spirit, he breaks himself apart, and he understands, and he acknowledges that it's the stubborn spirit of the Nefesh Bahamis which ultimately vitalizes the body, which makes the body that guf, which lay nahir, makes it that body which does not allow the light of the neshama to penetrate. How you break it apart is similar to the log. When the breaking apart the log allows the fire to penetrate. So breaking apart the guf and the ruach is through a ruach nishbar, a broken spirit. And as we said, by a Beinani, and this was the conclusion of last week's class, by a Beinani, his spirit. You say breaking his spirit, you're dealing with the spirit of Sitrach, you're dealing with the spirit of the impure force, because by a Beinani, that's who he is. By a Beinani, that's who he is, and we'll understand it by this which the Alter Rebbe over here contrasts the Beinani to the Tzaddik. So we'll understand it by the Tzaddik. We mentioned again, we jumped a little bit last week, just not with the text, but with the message which the Alter Rebbe gives subsequently, which we're going to look forward learning this with the text, which this is the beginning of this week's class, how the Alter Rebbe contrasts the Beinani with the Tzaddik. That gives us understanding of what's really happening by the Beinani. Well, what is when you say a ruach, a spirit of the Beinani, really is the spirit of the Nefesh Bahamis, of the animal soul, because by a Tzaddik, everything about him is godly, for he transformed anything which was not aligned with godliness, with his godly soul, to be aligned with his godly soul. Everything by the tzaddik the enemy becomes 100% an ally. The body, the animal soul, everything is transformed. As the Mishnah tells us, that it's about transforming the Yetzer Hara. When it comes to Beinani, in certain periods of the day that the Beinani can, as we said, when he davens, these moments of important spiritual ecstasy, if you will, which is again primarily when a Yid davens, a Beinani davens, but he has his Yetzer Hara is fully intact. By a Beinani, his Yetzer Hara, which is again basically all of us, the Yetzer Hara is fully intact. So by a tzat, so therefore, when we speak about a broken spirit which breaks apart the guf, or the gufnis, the bodilyness, if you will, of the Beinani, the guf which does not allow the Eira Neshama, the light of Neshama to penetrate, breaking. When you say Ruach Nishbara, again, this is a quote from the famous Tehillim, Psalms 51, about the spirit, the broken spirit. That is by the Beinani the Sitra Achra, which means that is by the Beinani the impure force, which resides overtly in the system of the Beinani. As we said, he doesn't sin, he never sins, but nonetheless he always has the temptation to sin, for he has a full Yetzer Hara, and his Yetzer Hara, his animal soul are fully intact. So when you're dealing about the bitush, the breaking apart, the crushing or the humiliating and the humbling, the guf, the body, which comes through a ruach nishbara, with a broken spirit, which we mentioned again, the uniqueness of the Alter Rebbe's doctrine, not, God forbid, physically breaking the body which hosts the nefesh b'ham, which is the primary host of the animal soul, or as the animal soul vitalizes the body, as it was other doctrines, physically mortifying the body. Alter Rebbe's school of thought or doctrine was very much not that, but it was more of the message to understand what is really going on behind the scene, and to want to at least nivze be'einav, in other words, to understand, to be shameful and even nimas, disgusted in his own eyes, because he knows what's behind that haughtiness or that chutzpah, that audacity of the Yetzer Hara, of the nefesh b'hamis. It's all about chutzpah. So he has this leiv nishbar v'nitke, this broken heart and this broken spirit. But again, Alter Rebbe makes it very clear, it's not a broken spirit of a godly soul, because you need not to break a spirit of a godly soul. The spirit of a godly soul, you got to build, not break. But when you say that the Beinani has this broken heart or broken spirit, is because his spirit is primarily animal spirit, because that's where the Beinani is. And again, we'll understand it clearer as the Alter Rebbe contrasts the Beinani to the tzaddik. So al nefesh alikis, when it comes to the godly soul by a Beinani, it says, Neshama shenasata b'tahirahi, the neshama that you gave in me is pure. Now this is something which we say every single day, right? We say every single day in the morning brachas, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakel niya bidvari. So we say every single day in davening, in brachas, in the morning blessings, God, Elokai, my God, neshama, the soul that you gave me, tahira, he is pure. So when you say you gave me, for example, let's say you give me a piece of cake, right, as an example. So there's me, and there's you, and there's the object which you're giving me. The fact that I say you gave me this piece of cake, that says that me and the piece of cake are not the same. Because if me and the piece of cake were the same, it's not that you gave it to me, it's me. So when the Beinani, for example, says neshama, that pure neshama, which you gave me is pure, but he says the neshama, that pure neshama, which is the godly soul, that you gave me, that itself says that's not me. And again, this is the proof, or we need not really a proof, because we know what we are in essence, or we know what we have, or know the potency of the nefesh b'hamis, which exists by the Beinani, or the nefesh b'hamis which exists by the Beinani is strong and potent, better said. But from the words itself, this is what we say in the morning prayer, in the morning bracha. God, the neshama which you gave me, that says that I am not a godly entity. I am a non-godly entity which you gave me the opportunity to exercise godliness and introduce and to myself and to people around me this godly service with the battery, with the koach, with the energy of this neshama. What allows the yid to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a godly manner? In other words, what allows the yid to exercise and this godly service is because he has a godly soul. So the godly soul is the battery, or that's the energy the man, a yid has, that he's able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to live a godly life by a prayer, by learning Torah, by doing mitzvahs, etc. So what does the yid gets up in the morning? What does he says? God, thank you for giving me this neshama. So he starts, neshama, this neshama which you gave me, it's tahora, it's pure. Obviously it's a godly soul, it's pure. But how does he begin? He doesn't say, I am the neshama. You gave me the neshama. That itself says there is a me which is separate from that neshama. What does that mean? It can't be I am also a godly entity, so then what do I need a neshama for? So that itself is a great proof that by the Beinoni, which is again this level which we all are demanded to strive to, is on its own a non-godly entity. And this non-godly entity, as he gets up in the morning, he says, God, thank you for giving me the neshama. For that matter, the neshama really remains by a yid from the moment he's born to the end of times, to the end of his days, or for all time as we enter into Yemei Mashiach. But we know when the person wakes up in the morning, the God. Why do we say it every day in the morning? We should have said it once when we were born. I mean, we can't speak when we're born, but let's say the first time, or let's say we become bar mitzvah. That's actually when the godly soul formally positions itself within the person. Why do we say it every day? I'm just saying this parenthetically. Why do we say it every day? Apparently, we lost the neshama when we went to sleep. The answer, and because neshama is not in full expression when a person goes to sleep. We try to actually, that's the reason why we say Kriya Shema before we go to sleep, is to make sure that the neshama doesn't completely remove itself and it stays connected with its godly energy, that the person should even sleep through the night in a godly manner and not, God forbid, in a non-godly manner. That's the point again when we say these different verses before we go to sleep, to connect. But nonetheless, you cannot compare the neshama when it exercises in full measures its godly experiences, when he learns, when he davens, in comparison to when he's sleeping. And that's why when the person wakes up in the morning, he says, thank you, God, for giving me the ability to serve you again with this godly energy, which is called the neshama. So he says, neshama shenasata bi, this neshama which you gave me is tahira, is pure. You gave it to me, and so on and so forth, and I thank you for it. But what Al Rebbe is getting over here, that itself is the greatest proof that the Beinoni himself, separating the neshama, which he's thanking God for, is not godly, is very animalistic, is very much nefesh bahamis, it's very much all about the animal soul. And therefore, when we speak about a broken spirit, which is so healthy, to allow the Eira Neshama, the light of the Neshama, to penetrate, the broken spirit is the spirit of the animal soul, because that's who primarily the Beinoni is. So we continue in the text of an Kis Shabbai, in his godly soul, Nema, he says, Neshama shenasata bi tahira, the Neshama which you gave me is pure. When you say shenasata bi, you gave it to me, that itself tells you, Michlal, Nesata bi daik, in other words, you see the emphasis over here, is that you gave it to me. Michlal, this is the greatest proof. The man himself is not that godly soul, to the exclusion of by tzaddikim. When it comes to the righteous people, righteous means saying that that's a level of tzaddikim which the Alter Rebbe describes the tzaddik, which the individual which carries the term of the tzaddik justifiably. In other words, based on not just some people say he's a tzaddik, someone who's a tzaddik, the way the Alter Rebbe describes a tzaddik, which is the true halachic category, or the true category of a tzaddik, someone who transformed his animal soul, his Yetzer Hara, to God. It becomes like the lashon of the Zar, it becomes Yetzer Tov mamash. His Yetzer Hara becomes mamash like a Yetzer Tov. His animal soul is completely transformed and becomes a complete vehicle to the godly reality. And therefore, by a tzaddik, when you look at the tzaddik, everything about him is godliness. And when it comes to his body, that's guf basar badam. his consciousness, everything about him is a godly reality. His body is something which needs to be acknowledged, which is so diametrically opposite than by the Beinoni. The Beinoni gets up in the morning, it's I am, it's my body, my animal soul, and everything, which is not necessarily aligned with God and godliness. And I thank you, God, that you gave me a neshama, you gave me a godly soul. So there's me, and then there's the godly soul which I introduce into me. But the tzaddik is just the opposite. Everything about the tzaddik is about godliness. And he deals with his body. Oh, there's a body right there which is flesh and blood. Do we look at ourselves? We're alive. Hashem will. As just this is what am I touching? I'm touching that flesh and blood. No, and it's myself. I identify my body as part of who I am. And again, when I speak about the neshama, I thank the neshama that God allows or created the Jew. The neshama enters into the body in order to execute or exercise this godly conduct and godly experiences throughout the day through learning, davening, and so on. But who am I? I am. Who am I? I am. This is who I'm. My body is me. My animal soul is me. By the tzaddik is what just the opposite. Everything about the tzaddik is about godliness, and then there's a kind of cat there which you got to deal with, which is that thing which is basar v'dam, which is flesh and blood, which is external. And where do we see it? We said the story which again demonstrates or illustrates this notion so clearly, in such a strong, clear way, with this above mentioned idea how by the tzaddik everything about him is God, and the basar, the body is basar v'basar adam, it's called the flesh of the man. We saw by Hillel Zaken, when the famous sage Hillel, which was a godly Tana Hillel, as we know, right? The famous sage Hillel, when he went to eat, he used to say to his pupil, to his students, when he went to eat, he used to say, he's going to do kindness with that shameful entity and that poor entity. So he spoke about his body as a third party. It's like you see someone hungry, and it's like this poor, shameful, again, not in a condescending, it wasn't a condescending expression, or the expression of a condescending nature, but it was like the shameful thing which is hungry and poor. We got to go feed it. Like you see something, you see truly a third party, which is hungry and poor and destitute and desires to eat something in order to continue to live and maintain its in order to move on again, in order to exist and live and be healthy. So it before it eats, it is aniyah. It's poor, means to say it's desperate to eat, and it's desperate to just move on and live because it's hungry. So it's shameful, it's poor, and namely it's ta'ev. It's destitute to continue to live. So what do? You take a cookie or a piece of cake and you say, here, connect body and soul in order for you to continue to live. So the Gemara tells us when Hillel went to eat, he told the students that he's going to do kindness with this shameful and poor entity. Who was he talking about? Not a third party, physically a third party. He was talking about his own body. Why in the world did he talk about his own body as a third party? Because his body was a third party. It was a different party. Because Hillel Zaken is all about God and godliness. Everything about him, consciously, subconsciously, is all his actions, his emotions, his intellectual faculties, is all complete. Everything about all of his emotions, rather, all of his intellectual faculties. Now, every part of intellectual faculties is completely a conduit to God, God's Torah, and the entire godly reality. And then God created him still as a human being. So he has flesh and blood. And we know flesh and blood, in order to exist, they need to eat. You can't ignore the needs of the body, because in the end of the day, the body, the makeup of the body is that it's dependent on actual food. So you got to feed the body. So when Hillel HaZaken is going to eat his meal, he's saying, oh, he tells the students that he's going to deal with that shameful and poor entity, which is ultimately his body. What about who? Because who was Hillel HaZaken? Hillel HaZaken was all about godliness. In contrast to the BAYT, and he says, because the Hillel HaZaken, his bodily needs were alien. His body was alien entity by him. Therefore he said, he's doing kindness with that body, and the fact that he is feeding that body, because Hillel himself, which again Hillel and as well other true tzaddikim, it's all about the godly soul. Because the godly soul is the only energy which is mechayi gufay upsari, which vitalizes his body and his flesh, because that evil which was in his lively soul, which is originally was in nefesh bahamis, the animal soul, which is invested in b'mlubeshes b'dami upsari, which is invested in his blood and his flesh, which the Alter Rebbe establishes in the very first chapter, based on the famous pasuk Kinevesh Habasar b'damhi. It's the animal soul which ultimately vitalizes the person. It enters into the blood, and again we know that reviz dam, the certain amount of blood a person needs in order to live, to exist, to move on. So it's the animal soul which invests in the blood, and the blood ultimately physically, the blood is the container which contains the animal soul, which ultimately vitalizes the entire person's body. And therefore, when a person has to eat, again, what happens to the food? It becomes dam ubasar gubsar, it becomes the person's blood, and that's why he's able to live. Like it says again, ki nefesh habasar b'dami. So that's the way it was initially, even by Hillel. But eventually, and we said, where does in the nefesh bahamis, in the beginning, in the onset, or what is the nefesh bahamis? What is the texture of the nefesh bahamis? What is the material of the nefesh bahamis? So what is it? Where does it come from? We said already, we established in the very early chapters, it comes from klipa, it comes from the evil spirit, but again, not the lower level of impurity, the spirit of impurity, but it comes from the neutrals. We said klipas nega. One is everybody is easy. Welcome to see it in the previous chapters where he describes where does the energy of the animal soul come from. It doesn't come from the lower level of impurity, it comes from the neutral level of impurity. But impure it still remains, or it's impure, with impurity it's still connected to. But yet by a tzaddik, that animal, this evil, which even the subtle evil, or this evil which is associated with klipas nega, the neutral klipa, which is invested in the nefesh bahamis in the very beginning, and the onset, which is invested in the animal soul, which is mulubeshes, which is invested in the blood and flesh of the human being, by a tzaddik, all that was transformed l'taiv, it was transformed to good. So everything about it, the tzaddik, from A to Z, is about the nefesh l'kisa, about the godly soul. And everything was consumed in the kedusha, in the sanctity of the nefesh l'kis mamash, but tzaddikim, into the sanctity of the godly soul, by tzaddikim, precisely by the tzaddikim, which is not common. The whole notion of tzaddik, especially with Alter Rebbe explains the tzaddik. By the way, to know exactly where the nefesh bahamis connection, where the nefesh bahamis comes from. We just mentioned, we could look in the previous chapters. I'm just going to say that it's to want exactly find it. It is in the very beginning of the 7th chapter. Alter Rebbe deals with the animal soul and says, what is the source of the nefesh bahamis? For that matter, again, this is one of the things the Alter Rebbe emphasized. The nefesh bahamis has the ability to be that's why it has the ability to be transformed to kedusha, to holiness, because it does not come from the lower level of impurity. Because something would come from the lower level of impurity, one cannot transform into godliness. I'm going to eat a non-kosher piece of meat, and I'm going to make a bracha on it, and I'm going to utilize the energy which I receive from that non-kosher piece of meat to do a mitzvah. Without consuming that piece of meat, I'm tired. I'm not going to go feed somebody. I'm not going to go distribute something to a poor person. But now that I'm going to eat, I'm going to consume that non-kosher piece of meat, I'm gaining strength. Physically, I am gaining strength. And therefore, this gives me the strength to do a mitzvah. or this gives me the strength to go ahead and learn for the next 2 hours, you're not elevating the piece of meat. Quite on the contrary. You don't have the ability to elevate the piece of meat, because the meat is connected and anchored, intrinsically connected and well anchored into the spirit of impurity, the lower level spirit of impurity, which cannot be transformed. It is too impure to be dealt with, therefore we have to stay away from it. When it comes to something non-kosher, we don't consume it or engage with it in order to transform it. We don't do that stuff. We stay away because God said that is well anchored in areas which you don't want to go. You're not allowed to go there, and therefore stay away from there. And therefore stay away from that piece of meat, even though I know it can give me energy and I can learn Torah for the subsequent 2 hours, as an example, or do a favor for another 10 people. But we don't do that. Obviously, to the exclusion when it's dangerous, when one doesn't have any need, he's going to expire if he doesn't. But that's a separate issue. As opposed to a kosher piece of meat, I can and we do eat a kosher piece of meat in order to gain the strength, in order to go ahead and learn Torah for the next 2 hours. As an example, giving meat, it's an apple, it's an orange, it's a piece of bread. It's not wholly before I engage with it. Where does it come from? Where is the energy of a kosher piece of meat? You cannot say it's like a pair of tefillin or it's like a sefer Torah, which is anchored in the world of purity, holiness, divinity. Where does the neutral piece, or where does the piece of bread, which is a kosher piece of bread or a kosher piece of meat or an apple and orange, where is that? What is the source to that? Where does that receive its energy from? That receives its energy from klipa snoga, which is the neutral klipa. Again, we're just repeating a little bit. You can see it in the previous chapters, in the chapter of 7, the beginning of 7, and in that area, among those chapters, which again, you're more than welcome to see it, as it's clear in the above-mentioned website. But the Alter Rebbe says there, just like when you're dealing with a kosher piece of meat, which is neutral, you can do, because you can take the kosher piece of meat and bring it down to the world, to the lower level of impurity as well. We gave the example then that somebody who's tired, he's not going to talk Lashon Hara, but now that he took the piece of meat and he even made a bracha on it, especially if he doesn't make a bracha, but even makes a bracha on it, now he feels good, so he can speak Lashon Hara. What did he do? He took something neutral and brought it down to a lower level of impurity. And that's the point of klipas nega. Klipas nega is such a type of klipa that it can go both ways. And there, with this again, I'm saying this because this just to explain what the Alter Rebbe means. The animal soul was transformed to be godly because the animal soul itself comes from that very same neutral area, which is klipas nega, which has the ability to go either direction. Like when you're in a car, you're neutral, you go front or you go back, progress or digress. Similarly, that a person could take his animal soul and become more and more animalistic, indulge in animalistic pleasures, and at that point he can and he probably will even cross the line from the green line, which is the world of permissibility, to the red line, which is the world of this which is prohibited, because he took his animal soul, which also comes from a neutral area, klipas nega, and he digressed. He becomes again, he indulges in the animalistic. And again, that can cross into the line of sin. Usually it does. When a person just without, you're driving quick and in the wrong area, you probably cross into areas which you're not supposed to be. But according to halach, you're not supposed to be there. But the same yid could do just the opposite. That's the beauty of the message of Torah v'ahavtas Hashem l'kecha b'chol levavcha, that you can take the Yetzer Hara, and in this case, I've explained so beautifully about that we can take the nefesh Bahamis, this animal soul, and transform it, that the animal soul could be an ally to the godly soul, and more so to be completely consumed into the holiness of nefesh Elikis, because that's the beauty of neutrality. It can go both ways, just like the kosher piece of meat. You could utilize it for something which is evil, or you could utilize it, elevate it, and make it a vehicle for something which brought you to do something good, again in the context of prayer, learning Torah, doing a kind deed. Alter Rebbe says the piece of meat itself becomes like a holy sacrifice. It becomes a godly reality. The kosher piece of meat, which till 2 minutes ago was just neutral, but if I made a bracha on it and I ate it l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, and I follow through with this heavenly sake, I learn Torah, I do a mitzvah, I pray, and so on. So the piece of meat, not only I'm elevated, the piece of meat becomes ka'ela, ka'karban, becomes like a holy sacrifice. And similarly, and this is the reason why we say, we're just repeating this over here, because similarly the whole nefesh bahamis. The animal soul, because of its neutrality, where it comes from, the same area of klipas nega, which is the lower, the higher, in other words, this level of impurity, which is still redeemable, or I wouldn't say the word redeemable, has the ability, it's still neutral, to use a precise word, has the ability to be completely elevated, just like it can digress, it can go backwards again, express itself with its natural animalistic and crass and perhaps some gross desires. Because it's an animal soul, it could be ultimately transformed like any animal. It could be a wild animal, but it could be a domestic animal, and an animal which just serves the purpose, serves its master, and it contributes to its master's calm and tranquility. So the animal becomes part of the plan. And similarly, the nefesh bahamis, because it comes from klipas nega, has the ability to be completely transformed. It can not only be a vehicle to the godly reality, but it says v'nichlal, we can be consumed into the holiness of the nefesh elikis mamash. But where is that? By who is that? 24/7. Through entire life, the animal soul is never, not only doesn't express itself animalistically, but is completely a conduit, or be completely consumed into the sanctity of the godly soul. That's only by tzaddik. Only by tzaddik. Who could you say that say, oh, everything about him is godly? You know people like that? It's a rarity. Which again, we should never just use the term tzaddiks lightly. A tzaddik is a very, very unique, special reality. Or a unique, special term. Unique, special Jew. But the Beinani, which is also very special, because you think must have never sinned and never will sin, but yet what is the makeup of the Beinani? The makeup of the Beinani, his animal soul is very much intact. That's why he's still a Beinani, he's not a tzaddik. Very much intact. He didn't make no dent on his animal soul. He doesn't sin, he never gives in. Again, we don't have to repeat all these important concepts. We learn time and again, and we chew this over so many times. He never gives in. He never sins even once. He never allows the animal soul to express itself in its thought, speech, and action, because once he does that, if he violates, in other words, he enters into areas where Hashem says, do not do, speak, or think, then he's a Rosh, he's no more a Beinani. So the Beinani never sins and never will sin, but one thing is clear, he has a lust, he has a covet to sin, he has a Beinani, he has a nefesh bahamis, he still has an animal soul, and his animal soul is very much intact. So when the Beinani, going back to the Alter Rebbe's message, when the Beinani has the problem that his heart is verstopft, in other words, there's a blockage, he becomes like that log, what doesn't allow the fire to penetrate into it, into his conscious reality, or in his emotional reality, which this is part of the service of the Beinani, periodically become emotional with the divine, emotional with God, means to say that in his relationship with God, means to say that the godly soul penetrates deeply into his mitziut, into his reality. The problem becomes like thick and thickened, and it does, and the Arieh and the light of the neshama does not penetrate. So this is what the Mesifta, the Rosh Hashiva Gadayton says. It compares it to a log. The log is the perfect material for fire, but if it's a log, and then it's not broken up to pieces, the fire is not going to penetrate. Try to light a log. It's not going to work. Material is good, but it's just too stiff and too solid together, too stubborn. And then the same thing when the body demonstrates that stubbornness, which is associated with the chutzpah, with the audacious presentation of the impure spirit, which is again, this is which the nefesh bahamis himself is that host for that impure spirit, which the body is hosting the animal soul, which the animal soul is the vital energy which vitalizes the body. And you see, you have that thickness, that timtum, that blockage which does not let the Arieh and neshama, the light of the neshama, to filter and to penetrate. You got to break it. And how do you break it? Through a broken spirit, a broken heart, and a broken spirit. But who is the spirit of this individual? What is the spirit of the individual? It's not the godly spirit. It is the animal spirit. Because the Beinani, everything about the Beinani is his nefesh bahamis, is his animal. So in order to break apart, to loosen the guf or the nefesh bahamis from its crassness, it takes a broken heart and a broken spirit, and one being shamed in his eyes, again with the expression of the Alter Rebbe in the last week's class, which again that breaks apart the animal soul and the guf. But again, why is it through the Lev Nishbar, through the broken heart and the broken spirit? Because the spirit of the Beinoni is the animal soul. It's not the godly soul, in contrast to the tzaddik. And we'll finish up just a few words over here. By the Beinoni, because it's essence, the essence of the animal soul, the essence of the soul, which is again a chayunis, the soul which gives the body life, which is the animal soul, which comes from the impure forces. Not the lower level, but still from the impure forces it still comes, and it's invested in in his blood, in his flesh, has not been transformed to good. Similar to like the tzaddik, which has transformed to tov and kedusha, to good and holiness. In this case, by the Beinoni, has not transformed to the good. Harihi adam atzmai. So that is who the person is. This is who he is. V'imkein, and therefore, if you think about who this individual is, even as that struggling Beinoni, he's rachik me'Hashem b'tachas harichuk. He's distant from God, the maximum distance, because that force which has a lust, the lust and temptation of the animal soul could also have a lust and have a temptation for things which are by definition prohibited, not only animalistic but prohibited, which are negative, which completely contrary to God's desire. And Alter Rebbe is going to say over here, even, just a quick moment, even he doesn't plan to do it, to God forbid, go ahead and execute these temptations, because once he does it, he's no more Beinoni, he's a Rasha, and we're dealing with a Beinoni which never crosses the line, but the fact that he still has an Nefesh Bahamis, which has a temptation to do so, so who is he? He is somebody which is, by definition, distant, Rachik Me'Hashem, distant from God. Again, his makeup, God appreciates his service, but who is he? In contrast to the tzaddik, that everything about the tzaddik is godly, divine, spiritual, holy, sacred. By the Beinoni, it's just the opposite. And therefore, this is the suggestion, that broken heart and the broken spirit, which ultimately allows the light of the neshama to enter and to penetrate, and that this same Beinoni, which the day before he was missing his fiery passion in his pursuit to godliness, that the Arieh neshama, the light of the neshama, should penetrate as a result of his broken spirit and broken heart and all the other l'shainis expressions of Alter Rebbe, which we learned in the previous class, that allows the Arieh neshama, the light of the neshama, to enter, and that he again regains that emotional, or that ability to express his connection and a connection to the Almighty in an emotional level, and a passionate level, and a fiery passionate level, which again deals with the other issue and the other problem, that he doesn't, as a result, give in to his temptations, and he's able to l'kadosh atzmai, to sanctify himself in the permissible, based on the pasuk which we mentioned the other week. Again, this is all based on that famous pasuk, that God demands that we live a sanctified life. And again, sanctified life is primarily the term, or the pasuk is primarily dealing with this which is by definition permissible. And that takes care of that, because if there's a fire burning, if the Arieh neshama, the light of the neshama, is allowed to penetrate, allowed to express itself in the heart of this individual, even this Beinoni, obviously this allows him, lifts him to a level that it becomes easy for him not to be indulgent in things which are animalistic, and to fulfill this pasuk which says, "V'skadishim, sanctify yourself accordingly." Go ahead.
So Beinoni never sins but never elevates.
Never what?
Elevates himself.
Never sins, but is never transformed to a godly entity. And he could live all his life like that. And to be, and say, so at what point does a tzaddik become a tzaddik? If the Beinoni cannot completely transform his whole reality again, periodically he can. A good davening, we spoke about it then, and Alter Rebbe mentions that there's certain times during the day, or during his life, or during the year, that the Beinoni could be kind of on a similar level to the tzaddik, at least a momentary experience, but on the overall, he doesn't have the ability to cancel his Yetzer Hara and to completely obliterate his Yetzer Hara, his animal soul. Like you say, his animal soul is completely intact. He cannot become this godly reality similar to the tzaddik. The question is, at what point does a tzaddik become a tzaddik? If he can't do it, if the average person is meant to be the Beinani, again, and this is what he has the access, he has the accessibility, is just to be the Beinani. So at what point can a person become a tzaddik? Answer, it's not that you're doing it, because you cannot become a tzaddik on your own. It's when this God, for whatever reason he has, decides to upgrade you to the tzaddik. And Rabbi uses later the expression that it's similar to a kohen. He brings it again, it's mentioned a number of places, that the term avedas maton es etin es kuhunaschem, that the whole idea, just like a kohen is a present, it's a gift, one cannot on his own achieve or attain the level of a kohen. Similarly, one cannot achieve and attain the level of a tzaddik. It's God decides to give you that gift to upgrade you from a beni to a tzaddik. Now, who does God decide to upgrade? Well, that's his business. To the extent that a person could live all his life like a Beinani, which means never be upgraded to the level of a tzaddik, means to say that just like he had when he was 16 or he was 26, he had this constant war, and he felt that his animal soul, as his heart is in full tact and constantly trying to overcome his thought, speech, and action, his action or speech or even thought. Let's use it in that direction, because the thought is always more difficult. But yet, he had the struggle, and he was able to overcome because he's a Beinani. It could be the same person. If God decides, of whatever reason he, capital H, has, he could remain a Beinani all his life. When he's 60, he could have the same problems, or the same challenges, let's call it, like when he was 16 or 26. If the person at 60 he changed, it's not because he changed. It's because God decided to upgrade him. So the tzaddik is similar to like a kohen notion, which a kohen is not something you could upgrade yourself to be a kohen from a Yisrael. God decides you're a kohen, you're a kohen, if not similarly the tzaddik. So you do whatever you can. And he gives, again, I don't want to, we're pretty much just stop over here, but there is something we could try to kind of tap into to the idea of the tzaddik, to try to find our pleasures, our emotional attachments to things which are sublime, superior, similar to the tzaddik. But to be a full-fledged tzaddik, it says if a person works very hard, sometimes a certain, Dr. Rabbi writes that a spirit of a tzaddik could be impregnated into you because you're trying, you want to be a tzaddik. But a full-fledged tzaddik is completely it's up to God to upgrade the person. So the Beinani said, this is one of the reasons that we should never feel down, depressed, melancholy. Oh, yesterday's challenge was the same as the day before, and today's challenge is the same as last year, and the same when I went 10 years ago, and the same when I was 16 and 26. What's going on? It's not worth the whole deal. It's not true. Because God didn't upgrade you to the level of tzaddik. That's probably what He has in His master plan for you. Go ahead and serve God with elation and joy, knowing that this is what He has in His plan for you. Because how do you know? Because you know that you still have the Yetzer Hara, you still have the same challenges. You got to control your eyes, your ears, and your thoughts, and so on. That shows that your Yetzer Hara is fully intact. That shows God did not upgrade me. So what am I supposed to do? Continue serving God with the same simcha, the same tuv levov, gladness of heart, because that's what He has in stock for me. And a person should not feel down because maybe he's supposed to be a Beinani all his life. But one thing is clear, that the Beinani does periodically, like I say, it's important, the Beinani does periodically experience this attachment to God on an emotional level as well. And it's important, and again, namely when the Beinani, namely it's the experience of prayer, and we know a good healthy prayer is exercised, or when the Beinani exercises a good healthy prayer, we know how important it is for the Beinani to allow him to be the Beinani for the rest of the day, to be higher, and to look at life more seriously, or to never to lose focus rather of his mandate, his objective and mission, what he's here for. Davening helps, because davening we do connect to God on an emotional level, and when you're connected to God on an emotional level, you're already elevated to there's something of you, part of you, that is godly. You're not completely transformed, because that's the tzaddik. You're still the Beinani, which has a Yetzer Hara. But davening, the fact that davening is that you're able to become passionately connected or midubak, which means attached to the Almighty, so you're able to constantly stay focused, and namely it reflects not only in things which are clearly prohibited to do, but not to indulge in things which even are permissible to fulfill this pasuk, which we spoke about in the past and last week, to sanctify yourself even this which is permissible. So it goes really together. When you have the ability to become emotional with your Creator, or you're connected to God on an emotional level, that itself enables you to uplift yourself and to stay focused, that even things which are permissible, not necessarily I have to engage with that. I don't need the extra, I'm full, I ate well. I don't need to, just because my eyes saw it and my nose smelt it, to again put it into my mouth, or any type of other animalistic engage in connection or engaging with. And that's why the Rebbe began the two ideas. He put it together. The timtum alev, the blockage of the heart, as well. That causes that man, he's still a Beinoni. He would never violate something which is prohibited, but he doesn't have the able to sanctify himself in this which is prohibited, because they're both connected. Because when you do connect yourself to God on an emotional level, a few times that they are, namely by shachris, you're able to, or by prayer, I would say shachris, for that matter, every prayer. Shachas, we elaborate more in the prayer, but we're able to connect ourselves to God on an emotional level. That gives us the ability to uplift ourselves, that we should not fall prey to everything, in other words, to indulge in the material or this which is halachically permissible. So they really go through, because if there's a godly fire burning in my soul, in my heart, obviously I always want to rather stay aloof or elevated or exalted or more connected to on a more constant basis with the divine, and to stay focused, not to drop into areas which I need not to go. And again, and this is which way the problem is, when there is the blockage, this is the suggestion. But the Alter Rebbe says, when you become that log, this is the suggestion, to allow the Eira Neshama, the light of the Neshama, to penetrate and burn. In other words, a person could periodically have a passionate connection.
We should try to live more like a ascetic type of life, avoiding
it's not a matter of avoiding.
Don't have chocolate bar, make a nice bracha and eat it and enjoy
Good.
it. Is it better to not to do it?
The thing is like this. When someone, we spoke about this last week.
Overindulgence, yes.
That's right. We're talking about being overly indulgent, which means like this. That's the beauty of this mitzvah, Kaddish Miskin Kadeshim. We spoke about it last week. It's a famous question. If he violates this pasuk, how is he a Beinoni? But again, you could see it in last week's class, because this is a gray area. Because it could be when I'm hungry, it's vital that I do make a bracha. And I do eat it. Because if I have to learn the next 2 hours, and I have to understand every piece of Gemara and every Rashi and every Tosfos, or whatever I'm learning, or I have to have enough energy to carry this bag to 10 of my friends, as an example, so I must make the bracha, I must eat it. And not only that, that piece of cake is becoming like a sacrifice, like we just said. Because the piece of cake is receiving its energy from the neutral, the klipas nega, and I can elevate it.
To be eaten by
right, and I can make a bracha and eat it. But what if I sat down, I had a good sandwich, and I had a piece of cake also, and I'm feeling good, I wanted a piece of cake just because I feel that the sandwiches puts me down, but a good piece of cake with coffee makes me good. That's how nature people have, they take a little pipe or a cigar, I'm not going to, it's just a certain, I feel complete, I can go out and do what I have to do. Let's say a person needs it. Not everybody's the same. Because it could be, it's a gray area, not only between two people. Sometimes myself, sometimes I need it, sometimes I don't. But let's say I did all that, and all of a sudden, my eye catches in the corner of my eye. There's another something which could contribute to my good feeling. In other words, you look at the animal. It's not necessarily all it does bad things, but whatever contributes to its comfort, that's what it does. Look at the life of the animal. Whatever contributes to the comfort, that's what it does. So this is something which, again, I'll appreciate. My body will appreciate. My animal soul will appreciate it. Will appreciate it, and it indeed will.
Yeah.
It will indeed will appreciate it, because it's tasty. It has a good flavor. But I'm full and I was complete, and I had my piece of cake, and I had my coffee as well, and I'm all good. But my eye caught something, for example. I have to have when I go ahead and take it. It seems inappropriate, and it is inappropriate, because that's what it is, to sanctify yourself. The animal, that's what this is a clear, overly animalistic expression. I'm full. I have my cake and I have my coffee. You got onto the phone, right? I have my cake and I got my coffee, and I'm full. I feel good. But my eyes catch something else. That chocolate. What do you need it for? You don't need it.
You fool them.
And that just comes extra. That's where Torah says sanctify yourself. Don't be the animal.
Okay.
In other words, so therefore, it's something that it's the same piece of cake. When I'm hungry and I have to do some good stuff, and I need the energy to do some good stuff, or a mitzvah, or learn Torah. So Torah says, eat it, make a bracha on it, elevate it. But we're dealing with something that it's a matter of being overly indulgent, allowing the animalistic animal soul within me to be more, or to demonstrate its animalistic pleasures and desires just for the sake of being an animal, if you will. Excuse me, by boldness. That Torah says you shouldn't. That's the meaning of the pasuk v'skadishtem v'sim kadesh. Be sanctified. Live your life a little and a little higher. Be a little more elevated. How do you do that? You got to allow that the light of the neshama should penetrate within you. There shouldn't be that blockage, or that helps you, that assists you. For example, a yid would exercise as a healthy davening. It means to say that the light of the neshama, literally, he became passionate with his creator. That itself, you finish davening, you're not looking to indulge yourself in something which is animalistic. On the contrary, you're able to stay focused. What I need, I need. And what I don't need, I don't need. Then I need not to go there. For overall, I have a mission and I have a mandate. I can't waste my time. I can't waste my energy. Namely, I can't bring myself down to areas which is purposeless. And this is the eitzah, the suggestion that Dr. gives the BAYT. Have a wonderful evening.